Today we'll continue our discussion of Chapter 19's guidelines. These guidelines we're looking at today have to do with adult and child abuse, neglect, and other maltreatment. Some of them do require external cause codes, which are in Chapter 20, so we'll continue using both Chapters 19 and 20 in the ICD-10-CM codebook. The guideline we're looking at is 1C19F, Adult and Child Abuse, Neglect, and Other Maltreatment. There are two categories in our codebook, T74 and T76, that have to do with this guideline. The first, T74, is when adult and child abuse, neglect, or other maltreatment is confirmed. The second, T76 category, has to do with adult and child abuse, neglect, and other maltreatment suspected. A big difference. Then you're going to have that T76 code first, and then your next code is going to be your injury code, or if it's a mental health diagnosis, your mental health diagnosis. But that T74 or T76 is the first code in the code sequence. If the documentation in the record states abuse or neglect, it's stated this is abuse or this is neglect, you're going to code it as confirmed. But if the physician uses the word suspected, then we can't code that. And we have to be careful as coders that we do not interpret narrative descriptions as abuse. We have to have that physician stating an absolute confirmation of abuse before we're going to be coding it. And if you have any doubts based on the documentation you're looking at, you need to do a query. For cases of confirmed abuse or neglect, we do use an external cause code from the assault section of Chapter 20. That's X92 through Y09. And that's going to identify the cause of the physical injuries. If the abuse is confirmed, we're going to use a perpetrator code from Y07, and those perpetrator codes are based on the relationship between the perpetrator and the victim. So if you go and look at that category, it's going to say victim's father, victim's mother, victim's brother, other relative. So that's how it builds the perpetrator code. However, if you are coding a suspected case of abuse, you are not going to report any external cause or any perpetrator codes. There are also codes available if the patient is in the physician's office, for example, or in the hospital, and you are suspecting it's abuse, but then while they are during this encounter or during this admission, it's ruled out that we know it wasn't abuse. Then we're going to use the Z04.71 encounter if it's an adult, ruled out, or code Z04.72 if it's child abuse, ruled out. If you're using either of these Z04 category codes, you will not be using the T76. The first code had to do with physical abuse. Let me go back and just show you. We are looking at abuse, neglect, or mistreatment. And then when you get to the next guideline, it's going to say alleged rape or sexual abuse. So it's a little bit different. In this part of the guideline, it's Z04.71 and 72. But when you get to the rape or sexual abuse, you get a different fourth and fifth character. So it's Z04.41 for alleged adult rape, or Z04.42 for alleged child rape. A reminder that all 50 states and the District of Columbia, the territories of the United States, have mandatory reporting laws regarding child abuse and neglect that require professionals to report suspected maltreatment to Child Protective Services. That's why it is so important that we code these accurately. Incidents of documented adult abuse complicating a pregnancy, whether it's suspected or confirmed, does not go in the T74 or T76 category codes. It goes back to Chapter 15, which were our OB codes, where they have specific codes for instances of adult abuse complicating pregnancy. Here's an example. In the emergency department, patient is a 13-year-old female who is a victim of child abuse. The physician has just stated this is confirmed. She sustained third-degree burns to her trunk when boiling liquid was thrown on her by her father. So we're going to be coding a confirmed case of child abuse, and we are going to be coding the perpetrator because it's a confirmed case of abuse. I have the pathways there on the right. You see that the T74 code confirmed goes first, then the burn code, then you start looking at your external cause. For example, the assault X98 category is there, and the perpetrator code is the last code. The sequence of the codes is important, so it's important that you follow your guidelines. That helps us know how we code these, the sequencing. Here's another one, shaken infant syndrome. 2-week-old infant was brought to the ED by first responders, found to be unresponsive by his grandmother. The child's stepbrother admitted shaking the infant because he would not stop crying, and the stepbrother was trying to sleep. A CAT scan revealed the infant has a subdural hemorrhage. So our diagnosis is shaken infant syndrome, which is a confirmed case of abuse, and the perpetrator's child, in this case, is a child's stepbrother. So I have a pathway here. Note, please, that there is a specific diagnosis for a shaken infant syndrome. Then you're going to code the subdural hemorrhage and the perpetrator code for the stepbrother. Now let's look at a case of suspected child abuse, how your documentation might read. The patient is a 3-year-old boy known to our practice. His mother brought him in for evaluation after noticing his left arm is very bruised, and the boy cries when his arm is touched. When his mother was out of the room, I asked the child if someone hurt him, and he said yes, but he would not say anything else. There have been suspected child abuse cases in this family over the years for this child's older siblings. X-rays taken today revealed the boy has a closed spiral fracture, non-displaced, of his left radius. We applied a cast and asked that he be brought back in 2 weeks to check his healing, and the physician has documented suspected child abuse. So in this case, this takes us to the T76 code for suspected child maltreatment, and we see that there is an instructional note with T76 category telling us to use additional code to identify the injury, which we have done with the S52 code. Now let's look at using those Z codes. Physician office visit. Patient is a 10-year-old female brought to the office by her father. He felt that she was not acting right, although there were no obvious signs or symptoms present of any injury. The child has had numerous injuries in the past, and I was initially suspicious she was a victim of child abuse. However, the child denied any assault or abuse, and X-rays were unremarkable for any injuries. Impression examination for physical abuse of a child ruled out. So this gives us the Z04.72. So look carefully at the pathway and see that you start with encounter, which takes you to examination, which you then follow the pathway abuse, physical, ruled out, child. And I've re-quoted the guideline there for you. Please review these guidelines carefully. To me, the reporting of child abuse is one of the most important things you can do as a professional coder. So it's important that the proper people are notified and the proper investigations take place to protect our most vulnerable citizens, and that's our children. So let me know if you have any questions. Have a good day.